Hello and welcome to the WriteCome.com podcast, where we help you to make money from your words. Each episode will be sharing tips, tricks, and strategies you can use to make more money from your writing, publishing, and marketing to your fans and audience. Let's get started with your host, Barry J. McDonald.
Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very welcome to today's podcast episode from WriteCome.com, and today's podcast episode is entitled Minimise. Now, what do I mean by minimize? Well, in this episode of the podcast, I'd like to talk about using the topic of it's a hard word for me, minimization as a way of creating content. Now, I did do a search on the podcast looking back over some of the content ideas I've given you in the past, and forgive me if I have brought this up before. I am 318 episodes or so into it, so I don't think I have, but if I have, if you'll just bear with me, it probably is worth going down that route again. Now, for a lot of people, when it comes to creating content, we do think, well, we need to do things bigger, we need to do things grander, we need to give our readers and our followers as much information as possible. But I want you maybe just to turn that on its head, and I want you to think, how can I give them the minimum amount of information and still make it useful to them? Now, what I mean by minimizing your content is that you should take some of your content and actually break it down and make it into smaller pieces. Now, for example, if I had an article with 10 different tips on how to use weight, I could break that article down into 10 different blog posts, in that I could take every single one of those tips, I could expand on them, I could show that person how they could put that tip into practical use every day, and I could also tell them probably how they could stack one of these tips on top of the other. So I could have a collection of blog posts simply just taking that 10 tip article and breaking it down into tiny pieces. And again, too, even in a podcast episode like I do sometimes, I sometimes just take a line or a quote or even a few words out of a podcast episode, and I simply put it on a background on the website stencil, and then I simply upload that to my social media. And again, too, if you have a training course, is there any way you could maybe take part of that training course, whether it may be in video or PDF document, and maybe break down that content into tiny pieces and take one of those pieces and simply just create a PDF document about it, where you explain exactly how you need to do a certain topic. Now, Sean D'Souza is someone who is really great at coming up with great content ideas and also breaking big topics down into tiny baby-sized pieces. For example, he has a product where he breaks down a simple sales letter. So what he does is he has a training course on how to come up with headlines. Again, he has another one on copywriting. He has another one then on images. He has another course on testimonials. He has another one on your pricing and guarantees. So what he's done is he has taken the writing of a simple sales letter down to individual pieces. So you can buy, if you'd like to get better on headlines, Sean has a PDF document and a course on how to write better headlines, and that is the only thing he solely focuses on, that content. So if you maybe need to get better at your headlines, or you're not too sure how to create headlines, you could buy that PDF document. Or for example then too, if maybe you are having trouble getting testimonials from your customers, or maybe the testimonials weren't great and you were looking for some way to either get more testimonials or get your customers to write them in a better way, Sean again too has a PDF document on a simple thing as gathering testimonials and how to get your customers to write the right testimonials for you to make them more glowing and to entice other buyers to buy your product. So what I want you to do is, if you are creating content, I want you to stop looking at creating more and more and see, is there any way you can actually create less and less? Is there any way you can summarize an article today into a simple quote? Is there any way maybe you can take a podcast or something like that and maybe take a line out of it and just have it on a background image today on your social media? Is there any way you could break down a training course and just simply take one piece away from it and then either create a lead magnet with it or actually create a training course of its own. Again, to doing something like Sean does with the sales letters, in that you could have a training course simply dedicated to headlines, you could have a training course simply dedicated to testimonials, you could have another training course dedicated simply to pricing, or any of those aspects. So again, too, if you do have any training courses, if you do have any content, if you do have any articles or whatever, instead of looking big today, think minimize. How can I minimize this down to the smallest nugget? Because at the end of the day, a lot of people nowadays are, even though we are probably spending more time on social media, people's, attention spans have got shorter and shorter, and a lot of people probably aren't reading those long, lengthy blog posts because they just haven't got the time to do it. Whereas if you could summarize something up in a simple quote, if you could give them a topic or an idea that they could run away with on an image or whatever, they would probably be grateful to do that. So instead of coming up with big ideas today, think small, think minimize, and see is there any way you can break down your original content into even smaller products, into smaller social media ideas, or into other pieces of content for other platforms. So as always, if you'd like to reach out to me, if you'd like to ask me a question, or you'd like me to cover anything in this podcast, you can certainly send an email to barryjmcdonald@gmail.com, and that's my personal email, so you'll be contacting me directly. And if you would like to get into self-publishing and writing books or whatever, again, if you want to head over to the domain name on this podcast, which is Writecom, that's WRITECOME.com. And if you're enjoying this podcast, if maybe you'd like to subscribe, I will send all the next couple of episodes directly on to you. Or if you'd like to share this podcast with somebody else, I would greatly appreciate it. So as always, thanks for sharing your time again today. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like more from the Writecom.com podcast, be sure to subscribe now for more tips, tricks, and ideas you can use to make more money from your words. See you in the next episode.